Hello, listeners. It's your host, Gavon, and today we have an incredible voice joining us. She goes by Ana Andjelic. Ana is a strategy executive and was listed as one of the world's most influential CMOs by Forbes 3 times. Ana earned her doctorate in sociology and master's in media studies, and she's held the title Chief Brand Officer at fashion brands such as Rebecca Minkoff, Banana Republic, and Esprit. She has a Substack titled The Sociology of Business, which is an incredible resource for professionals looking to connect brand and business through culture. She also has written and published a book titled The Business of Aspiration: How Social, Cultural, and Environmental Capital Changes Brands. I've read this one myself, and it teaches readers about culture hacking, social influence, the forces of brand strategy, and so much more. She has another book coming out December 13th titled Hitmakers: How Brands Influence Culture. She's a widely read columnist, public speaker, advisor, and today she's joining me in the hype seat. Welcome, Ana, to the Right Hype podcast.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction, and thanks for reaching out and having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Awesome. I'm super excited too. And before we jumped on, I told you you were on my vision board as someone who I wanted to interview. So this is a dream come true. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with me and just being open and willing to share your knowledge, not only with myself, but others. I really created this platform as a blueprint for those coming up in fashion and creative industries and who want to have impact. And you've done that. So, what's your secret?
Wow, I wish I had a secret, because then I would be a millionaire. And then what billionaire? Billionaire, then I would have that on my vision board. So no, there are no secrets. And also I don't believe in secrets. I believe that there is um, great joy in sharing one's knowledge. And that was a driving force in everything I've always done. Ever since I was a doctoral student, I was doing, I already started working. I was at AKQA, Razorfish. We're talking like million years ago, like 18 years ago. And I realized that there is like a big difference in sort of practical orientation of professionals and practitioners, and then this theoretical research orientation in academia. So my original, I had like, before newsletters, there was a blog called I Love Marketing, but love was like scratched. And because I was looking at the marketing from a perspective of experience design, or behavioral economics, social influence, like everything that marketing actually does or should do, but they're not owning it as a practice. So it's kind of marketing is more than just advertising. So that was the idea. And that's why I started that blog in 2008 as a way to share knowledge, to share what I know, because I was lucky enough that I was in a doctoral program, learning from the best, being among the smartest. And that training, I basically that structured thinking, that strategic thinking I wanted to share. So that is my secret. If there is any secret, is basically generosity in sharing what you know.
I love that. That's like such an abundance mindset, and it helps to just build more creativity and energy. Not just around you, but the work that you do, I'm sure has benefited from being able to communicate with other people and share that knowledge and build.
Always, honestly, I have to tell you, I think the highlight of my career, there are many highlights in a way, like the rebrand of Banana Republic, the Forbes, the so on. But the biggest really thing is when people come to me and they're like, "Oh my God, I read your Substack. I use it so much. It's all like it's so useful." And for me, that's kind of like, oh, if I'm useful, if that's what I'm sharing is useful for, if it advances discipline, then my job is done.
Excellent. Yes. So, like we talked about, you have a book coming up titled Hitmakers. Can you tell us anything about the new book?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for asking. It's available on pre-order for those who feel inclined for some Christmas shopping.
Mhm.
So it is about why brand marketing strategy is actually the strategy of cultural influence. It has always been, but I'm operationalizing it and building a framework for people to apply. So the way I'm operationalizing it, I'm basically asking what can be productized. That means how is brand aesthetic productized in brand codes, in styling, in a specific aesthetic territory that the brand owns, pattern, color palettes, prints, so on. What does merch products? A specific point of view, a specific cultural moment. What do collaborations productize? Basically, two brands coming together, remixing, rematching, DJing, and bringing something new, creative, original to the world. So out of that question came 10 cultural products. And why are they relevant? Because they replace how brands influence culture, how they did influence culture through mass media, to print advertising, to TV spots, so on, through events. It's basically saying, no, brands actually influence culture through merch, through collaborations, through their archives, through their intellectual property, exhibitions of their past, the brand codes, aesthetics, and so on. And then it looks at what the role of media is in that new landscape and media strategy, basically saying it's about the wide seeding of all of these cultural products at the same time in one unified cultural programming, and then using media to amplify those that are in the right context. And I put that under quotation marks because right context is the context that is more fertile, that is more accepting, that is most accepting, that is most responding to a specific idea and amplifies it. So it's kind of like the new manual for the new way of growing brands.
I definitely will piggyback, like you said. There's a lot of frameworks that you provide in, the book as well as your newsletter, and now with this new book that are really helpful for those who are coming up to understand how can I maybe be more effective with my own brand or be effective with my clients and really provoke them to think about culture differently because I'm sure if you've witnessed this, but I always sort of hear clients wanting to do something different and then sort of revert back to something like they would normally do. And it's so sad because that's exactly the opposite of what this new generation wants you to do. They don't actually want you to go back to the old way of doing things. They want you to consider new ways to show up. And I like how you're sort of talking about all the ways that brands can show up in non-traditional ways that have a larger impact.
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot agree more. And that's why it's important to have people who are in charge. I mean, everyone is in charge. You're like we are all in charge of our own ideas, our own work, our own processes, how we work with others, and so on. But it is important there is such a risk aversion in businesses. And I mean, being in a business, I cannot say that I don't see why. At the same time, that's why the way I kind of position this and the way we did it at Esprit and with High Snobiety as our partners was basically how to minimize risk and do it in a cost-effective way. And then when something is proven to work, then you put money behind it and give it scale and wings.
Yes, the test and learn. I love it. So take us a little bit back. I'm sure listeners are going to be very eager. Like, how did she get to where she is? So tell us how in terminology, broke into the fashion industry and maybe some of the highlights and moments that are really important to you.
I decided, I mean, like there's like overnight success is a result of like 15 years of experience. There is no such thing as overnight success if you want it to last. You really need to put your 10,000 hours. That's number one. But how I ended in a fashion luxury lifestyle is that I was interested always in brands that have, that influence culture. And fashion lifestyle luxury brands have an outsized cultural influence. So even if they have small budgets, even if they don't advertise, they're still going to participate in culture through their products, through their fans, through personalities of people who put new ideas into the world. So that was the original impetus when I was at joined Spring Studios, and then when I became a senior vice president and global strategy director at Havas Lux Hub, which was more looking at how do you really then reach high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals, but also the people who influence culture, that creative class who is going to be in charge of propagating ideas, sharing stories, who are going to be the first movers, so to speak, those who detect the zeitgeist, the vibe, who can read the atmosphere. So that was two sides. One is on the brand side, what kind of ideas, aesthetic ideas they put in the world, what kind of conversations they start, what kind of designs at the end of the day they release that people react to, or do those brands react to what they're seeing that creative class is doing. So that was kind of a big picture. And then I was not even thinking about going brand side, or that was not. And I would have breakfasts or coffees with Eri Minkoff, the CEO of Rebecca Minkoff. And one of those, who said, I don't want to be presumptuous, but would you consider joining us as a chief brand officer? And I know I called a friend and I was like, I think just got offered the job. And, and so that's, like things happen like that when you're doing something else. And so he had enough vision to at that time, it's 2018, 6 years ago, there were not so many chief brand officers. There were a lot of CMOs, but not chief brand officers. And now there are more. So it was really, really amazing to kind of have a role that was still wants to shape. And that was very exciting to mix the cultural influence with creativity, with strategy, and to actually learn how things work in the real world, and how to set a vision and organize people to deliver on that vision, and how to do things with resources that you're on your disposal, not maybe ideal scenario, but the real scenario.
Yeah, that's so good insight. I agree. I was a brand strategist in 2020. That's when I started my career, really. And I did not know the role as chief brand officer, right? Like I didn't know that brand was even a internal role. It always felt like a consultative or an agency role. So, um, going from like going into brand in house, what do you think is sort of like the edge that a brand officer should really be honing in on and constantly developing in order to be successful?
It's really that cultural influence, and that is really easier said than done. And I'll tell you why. It comes mostly from the way that companies are organized, and they're not set up usually now. Like like things are changing. There's different models and so on, but usually they're not set up for really what they call creative production, which is almost like thinking like an entertainment company, like show business, that brings together experts for very different areas, sits them in the room, and you're almost working on a project: merchandising, design, creative, marketing, media, PR. Everyone needs to work together in order to deliver the output that is going to be influential. But there is no one output, there is no one campaign. There is always on cultural output through all those different cultural products that everyone needs to create at the same time. And I'll give you an example. Companies do a lot of collaborations, but they fail to connect them with their main collection, for example. So there are a lot of good isolated, or they release merch, or they do a capsule, but there are a lot of isolated initiatives that are not connected in a cultural program. So in that sense, chief brand officers are in charge of that cultural programming through owning creative, through working very closely with design in my roles at Esprit, Banana Republic, design reported into me because of the need of synchronization between the brand message and a product message. But it's not always the case. Regardless, it is important to have the work closely with merchandising. What are the hero products here? What are the key drops? What are the their scenarios? What is a rollout plan? And everything needs to be synchronized. That's how you influence culture.
I love that. It goes back to a buzzword is like the story of it. Like how are you
The
carrying that
narrative,
narrative?
exactly. What you if you don't define the story at the beginning, that is gonna give you the both the tone of voice, the copy, the content, but also the aesthetic territories that you want to own, that you want to tell through the styling, the the products that how you're going to arrange all of that, the store experience. Without the narrative, you don't have a brand, really.
Yeah. And I think too, as a brand strategist or strategy, like sometimes we forget that the aesthetic is just as important. You know, it's not just the theoretical strategy or the words, it's also the visuals. And not I did get a compliment like many years back about being very visually inclined. Like I love to include swipe and just have more of this like romanticized copy because it draws you in. I mean, at the end of the day, and it shows a look and it shows your taste, you know. So
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought it up because you're actually building a world where everything is connected with everything else. So it's not only that world not only needs to be consistent, it also needs to be believable.
yeah,
And I think a lot of brands like don't deliver that like believability in a sense that you're like, I'm not buying it because it's not like rich enough, considered enough. Like when you're building a world, no detail is too small, and everything needs to be connected with everything else.
I love that. When you're building a world, no detail is too small. I like that. I want to talk a little bit more about leadership and creativity. You successfully rebranded Banana Republic, which resulted in a huge increase in sales. I personally noticed a shift when I was walking by the Grand Central Station store in New York, as well as the Westfield Mall in New Jersey. I could tell not just the visual, but the store felt a lot more high end, but not so like unbelievable and gaudy, but very rooted in their heritage. It was like a really polished sort of execution. And I feel like prior to their brand was sort of diluted, but it really gave it more oomph. So how do you prepare yourself for a rebrand project? And you know, what are some of sort of the challenges that that you have to overcome when executing a rebrand?
Oh, well, I don't prepare myself because no one normal would even put themselves through that. And it's a good thing. I just go in, just go in. And then it's never an individual. It's always a combination of things. So there was a CEO and her vision and making sure that there are enough resources that can happen. And then there was us in design. How do we like structure design? What is the design strategy? What is that really the brand aesthetic that we want to own, and then working with the brand identity agency who gave us the amazing prints and patterns and the new font, and then really working with internal teams and saying, hey, what is our annual theme, what are the quarterly, how do we tell our story every month, how do we kind of connect business with that through merchandising, how do we revive interest through our vintage shop, like what are the SKUs. You won't believe how granular you need to go, really. And then motivating people in the organization, and then really having a really clear vision in terms of visual merchandising. How do you want that story to be told through store experience, and then the website redesign at the same time, and then also finding the right photographer for the brand campaign, the right models, the right styling, the right location, and then the right idea, imagined worlds, like they're going on an adventure. But it always had to be a little bit more modern, a little bit more surreal, a little bit like Like, oh, who are those people? Where are they? It needs to be a story. Every single thing a brand does needs to tell a story in one image.
And it's hard, right? Because to your point, you have to be very detailed. And if one thing is off, consumers will notice.
Oh, gazillion%. So you can't tell this amazing story and build these stores and have visual and campaign, and that the product doesn't live up for it. No, no, no. It needs to be super synchronized. The product needs to be higher quality. The fit needs to be better. The point of view needs to be in every single product. And I think that was what this was so successful, because it was so integrated, it was so holistic, it was so considered and so believable.
Yes. So one question that I often think about is the role of creativity versus numbers and metrics. And I think there are a lot of people that can lean one or the other and not really know how to integrate. So you talk a lot about making sure that the approach is integrated. How often are you sharing ideas versus how often are you like digging into data? And like, what is the role that data sort of plays?
Well, I mean, we work in business, both of us. So at the end of the day, this is not art school, this is business, and business needs to deliver. So in that sense, everything you do creatively, strategically needs to be accountable, needs to have KPIs, and needs to deliver on the annual revenue goals, be part of P&L and so on. And for that, you really do need to monitor how different outputs, different actions perform. And that is going from the most simple thing is kind of on our Instagram grid with which posts are the most popular, what times are the best. When you send newsletters, you know what time. In Banana Republic, we discovered people love Thursday afternoons for shopping. Without data, we would have not known that. And that's a really useful thing. You can create the best creative, and well, if we send it at 4 p.m. or 3 p.m. on a Thursday, it's going to be opened and people are going to convert. So it's really useful to work in sync, in a sense that you don't only create the most creative ideas, but you influence culture in a way that is fertile, that you make sure that there is receptivity in in culture for your ideas. And that's what data is useful for.
That's good. I want to not play devil's advocate, but I think this is where I sometimes struggle, right? Is these posts, these times, these images, they perform well. But if you want to do something unpredictable, when do you know to break the mold?
That's a great point, and that's all. That's why, like, my answer is not like one on the other, and there is also not like you cannot. There is no such thing as dogma. Once you become dogmatic, you're dead. So, in that sense, of course, if you keep doing what was successful in the past, you're never going to unlock what's going to be successful in the future. At the same time, like, my advice overall is no, no, no. You build on past successes. That's how you make money. But they allow you, they fund your experimentation, you trying new things. So there is this really nice balance between kind of, if you constantly try new things, it's amazing. And some of those things are going to work and some of those things are not going to work, but someone needs to pay for it. So think about it in a way that tried and true, nice bottom of the pyramid. And then you play and you test, and then you turn that new thing that works into a practice, knowing that you'll have to kill your babies, that some of those practices are going to become obsolete. So
Yeah.
it's that exploitation balance that's unbelievably important.
True. That's very true. My prior boss, he used to tell me that the thing that he would pitch to clients is give us a little bit of budget to experiment and we'll show you, some future facing ideas and concepts that you want to put out in the market and test. And
Absolutely. So exploitation, exploration, the balance between the two. You exploit what you know, what you do well, what works well, but then you explore what is the next thing that's going to work well going to be.
Yes, exactly. Awesome. So I want to switch over to the hype seat. And this is where I get to introduce a topic and you give me your honest, unfiltered opinion. So the first topic I want us to talk about is sustainability in fashion. What are your thoughts?
The only way to be sustainable is to produce less and higher quality clothes. So that sounds like something that is the entire fashion system is built around novelty and speed and building demand and fast changing trends and so on. The only true way. The other way, that is business savvy way, just tax, like what France is doing with Zara, like what oil companies, tobacco companies, all right, you want to create harmful products, you're going to pay insane tax.
That's crazy. I mean, one thing that has been really sort of like sad to see is the closure of some of these sustainable brands. Like more recently, Mara Hoffman, she just had to close. And I've been thinking more about some of the work that we do at High Sobriety as it pertains to sustainability, how it's sort of a lot of the younger generations don't really know how to approach it anymore. They don't know how to feel about it anymore. There's it's sort of they were really hype about it probably 2, 3 years ago, and now that hype has sort of died down a bit. So it makes me question sort of the future of sustainable fashion and if it's able to survive in a market where a Shein exists, or even a Zara.
Well, I think that it's you need to break the problem down or to a lot of smaller parts. So I do believe that a lot of companies are, they have smaller initiatives, they have sustainable packaging, recyclable packaging. Let's start from that. Then you do cotton that is, but even that, we don't know enough. There is not enough transparency because even recycled cotton uses a lot of water and creates a lot of emissions. So it's not just enough to say we are recycling. And then it's not enough to say we are maybe upcycling, we are extending the life repairs. Literally, the only way is to go back where we were 100 years ago when we had 3 pairs of shoes that we repaired like ad nauseam, that we have one pair of you know what I mean? That when people were making high quality clothes, you don't even need to go that back. When we did vintage for Banana and then later for Esprit, that stuff, when I touched those leather jackets, those from 80s, from 90s, from 30 years ago, it was so high quality. And you get that high quality now in luxury brands. You don't get that. Those were mass brands, premium, so the quality went down so much. So it's kind of, you see, I'm going in a way that everything is so interconnected, but that doesn't mean that it's like because the problem is complex that we're not supposed to do anything. Like Stella McCartney now, you faux fur, and she had like recycled plastic bottles. She created those like faux feathers and so on. And then companies don't use real leather anymore. Like there are steps that every company can take. The problem is that it's not smart to claim you're sustainable because you need to be sustainable through your entire value chain, from your supply to your production to your distribution to your marketing, sales, and so on. And if you don't deliver that, then you're not telling the truth. And having entire value chain sustainable, it's a tall order. I don't know a single brand that successfully does that.
No. That's it. It is, and it's because it's because the system in place wasn't designed with that in mind. So now we're trying to find ways to.
And what are the financial incentives to really change how you are,
Mm,
if you're owned by private equity, if you're publicly traded company? So every quarter you need to deliver year-on-year results. The real thing you can really do about it, if you're a family-owned business, so you have like that longevity of time. So you see, like it's really interconnected with business models. And until sustainability really becomes the part of P&L, incentives are not there for companies.
that's so true, and I'm happy you brought up Stella McCartney because I actually wrote a paper on um, the human rights and global supply chain side for her brand and I mean her business, and she is leading the charge, when it comes to a luxury brand. I think it's so important that we look at Stella McCartney as somewhat of a case study. And I know there's a lot of conversations around sustainability is really about collaborating. It's about sharing the tricks, the tips on how to
It
build
is transparency, collaboration. Is like like you cannot solve problems. Problems are too complex to be solved alone.
No. So we're going to switch to our second hype seat question, which is the hierarchy in fashion.
Ooh, which one? There's so many.
I want to hear from, I guess, start with, well, tell us what they are. I'm very curious to hear your point of view.
Well, I mean, like you have hierarchies in terms of brands, number one. So the most brand sizes.
Yes.
Then you have hierarchy in terms of brand relevancy, which are most influential brands. They're not mapped. The biggest and maybe not the most influential, the most desirable. And then you have hierarchy of products as money makers or as cultural products. Pair of sneakers, a bag, like Hermes Birkin versus, I don't know, something that's like little Jacquemus little bag that was popular for one season, but you have like list index of the, most talked about brands and most purchased products. But then you have hierarchies of decision makers, of influencers. And I think we all know that now for me, it's very networked, very niche. It's not even that the hierarchy is appended that happened 10, 15 years ago with the first bloggers. It's more about that now you don't have this one idea that used to be one look, one trend, one idea. You have a gazillion ideas, gazillion trends. Some of them get big, like Brad Summer, Demure. Some of them are smaller, but they coexist at any given time. And a lot of different aesthetics coexist at any given time. So the trends are smaller, they're faster, they die quicker, but when they go big, they go big.
Should have asked is, a lot of the listeners of this podcast are interested in rising up in the ranks. They want to.
You want organizational hierarchy.
I honestly think about The Devil Wears Prada. That's like one of my favorite movies of all time. But you could so starkly see the hierarchy and how it sort of has a negative impact on the bottom. So I guess my question really is like, how long do you think that we will have this hierarchy, and will the power ever shift, or will we always be sort of struggling to create more equity in fashion?
Well, I do think that the power has been shifting, and I do think I've been at the Copenhagen Fashion Week at the end of this January, and there were people who are working on changing that hierarchy, who are creating opportunities for emerging designers, for design students, and then the creative, more gender, racially diverse environments. The problem is they're still outside of organizations, that you don't necessarily have that incentive within the organization. Yes, there is very clear-mindedness in terms of having diverse teams. Absolutely. That's already happening, not enough, but it is already happening. My challenge there, what I perceive as a challenge, again, is that there are a lot of conversations and there is a lot of action, but there is not a lot of action among decision makers still. And that is frustrating to see, because the structures are the same, the business models are the same, the organizational structures, the talent structures are the same as they've been 50 years ago. But the good news is that I'm feeling and I'm seeing that there is this shift, that there is this generational shift towards new business models, number one, towards new organizational structures, towards new talent structures. Maybe it's not happening as fast as we would like, but there is definitely something is in the air that we are going now through a meaningful reorg of. And again, it's a process.
Yeah.
So even if you're not seeing it much, it's like, you know how change happens slowly and then all at once.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like you said at the beginning, like you're either on the side that embraces the change or you're on the side that's resistant, and you don't want to be on the side that's resistant.
yes, because then, like as you hire new talent, as younger people are coming in, they're by default thinking about talent differently, thinking about their peers differently, thinking about opportunities differently. And I think that is what actually changes that cultural shift.
Yeah. Awesome. The last type C question I have is style. Describe your style for us.
Oh, it's I would say it's functional maximalism, which is like everything goes. It's a little bit of a magpie, but it's also like functionally in a sense like, oh, I'm not gonna wear super high heels, or I'm gonna just wear something sensible, but it has to be in kind of Burberry check, or it has to be like hot pink, and like and I'm very receptive to. I'm like antenna, So in a sense, it's always putting new things together. But like, believe it or not, I wear things from like 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, if you lived long enough, you've seen all those trends already, and chances are you already have something that is coming back. So it's all about kind of having that mix of really good quality stuff that's gonna last, and then something that like barn jacket, that's like new.
Yeah. What's if you don't mind me asking, what's a recent purchase that you were super excited about?
That I was excited about. Oh, I bought this like oversized coat from the Frankie shop, and I know that makes me a basic girl, but you know why I was excited? Because it was so soft, and I'm like, it's so sad that I'm excited that something is so soft and I'm so comfortable. But the shape was very like, I was like, I'm going to Paris. I need this coat.
I
I'm so
love
excited.
that. Yeah.
But because it's so soft, it's such a high quality, it's gonna stay with me.
I love that. I mean, those are the best purchases, the ones that you know are going to become a staple and they have this sort of emotional value that you just cling to.
I know, but like honestly, like I get excited about all my purchases, and then it actually I fall in love, and then it's
I love that. Oh my gosh.
not very sustainable, kids. Not very sustainable. Bill, get married to a brand. Don't flirt around.
I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. This was amazing. Last question. What is a piece of advice someone gave to you that changed your career?
Oh man, I mean, first of all, I don't listen to advice ever. So, people can give me advice, but I if I'm going to follow through or not, who knows? But the big, 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 big advice was a friend of mine was like, why don't you start the blog? Just start the blog in 2008. And then my current husband was like, where is that blog? Like what? So that advice was two-piece. One was inspiration. The other was execution. And I think that was something that set me on that path of me owning my knowledge, sharing that knowledge, and also owning my own brand in a sense, because I never identified myself. You know how people start a career and they spend a lot of years in the same place. I'm never like that. But I have big roles and I do a lot of great things with others in the companies. But at the end of the day, then I take a step back, then I do consulting, then I write the book, then I do, it's a kind of a portfolio approach. And I think that set me up on that portfolio approach of owning something that's mine.
I love that. I love that. I think a lot of listeners will love to hear that as well because there's a lot of multi hyphenates in our community. People that aren't a box. That I'm not just a strategist or I'm not just a designer. I also like to speak. I also love to run. I have a run club that I lead, or I teach sewing on the weekends and I'm a teacher. Like there's so many of us who have so many talents, and I think it's hard for an industry to embrace a multi-talented individual because I think they fear oftentimes that the work may not be as good or they're not as committed. And I love how you have sort of coined, not necessarily coined the term, but articulated so well this portfolio for yourself.
I meant to say that the careers are now portfolio approaches, that I don't think that new generations are those lifers or even someone who's gonna, like, you have to be committed no matter what you do. When I'm in a full-time job, I'm in a full-time job. And 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, no matter what. That's what it is. But then you also equally need to be committed, like, no. If I run this newsletter, if people are paying, if I say it's weekly newsletter, it's going to be a weekly newsletter. I have that commitment. If you're running a running club, that's your commitment. So it's really like finding all the things that one enjoys doing and committing to them in a way you never know what future brings. So one of those things may explode, the other may die down, the other may go in a different direction. So don't ever, ever, ever put all your eggs in one basket.
I love that. I love that. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you so, so much.
You
If
are
you're
very welcome.
yeah,
Lovely questions and lovely energy. You're amazing. One day I'm going to be working for you, so I better stay on your good side. I'm going to future-proof myself. Be staying close to the mega talent that's right here.
listen, that is a huge compliment in the thing
You'll
that
go
I
far,
needed.
my friend. You'll go far. I cannot wait to follow your journey, and I mean that.
Thank you. All the listeners, do yourself a favor and pre-order Hitmakers by Ana Andjelic. The link will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Ana. This was incredible.
Thank you.